Did you know that the penalties for not complying with the Immigration Act 2016 have changed? In this video, I'm going to be talking you through these new penalties as well as how you can avoid them as a landlord. And if you stick around until the end of this video, I have a special free gift just for you. As of February 2024, the penalties have increased drastically for landlords who have not followed the laws around checking their tenants' right to rent documentation. Previously, the penalties were £80 per lodger and £1,000 per occupier for your first offence, and £500 per lodger and £3,000 per occupier for your second offence. These have now increased. You could be fined up to £5,000 per lodger and £10,000 per occupier for your first offence, and a huge £10,000 per lodger and £20,000 per occupier for your second offence, and in worst case scenario, a prison sentence. This is a significant change and something you need to make sure you are checking and following the guidance on how to check this properly. The Immigration Act is a piece of legislation applicable to landlords and letting agents and came into force in England on the 1st of February 2016. The legislation states a landlord and or letting agent must be able to evidence any occupier's right to reside within the property throughout the duration of the tenancy. This means that prior to the commencement of tenancy, a landlord must check that any tenant or occupier that is going to be living in the property has the right to rent in the UK. This is applicable to every adult, 18 and over, that will be living in the property, whether they are named on the tenancy or not. Before I carry on, if you're finding this video helpful so far, please consider subscribing to our channel for more videos like this. The easiest document to use to prove your right to reside in the UK is a passport. If it is a UK passport, this is sufficient right to rent evidence for the duration of your tenancy. If your tenant is from the EU or outside of the EU and UK, this can now be verified online. In order to do this, you will need to obtain a share code given to you by your tenant or occupier. You can use the share code along with their date of birth and their full name to conduct an online right to rent check. Tenants from outside of the UK used to be able to provide a biometric residence permit, which are documents that have a set amount of time to reside. However, as of the 6th of April 2022, we can no longer use these alone as a tenant or occupier's right to rent. You will also need to conduct the online right to rent check using their share code, their date of birth, and their full name to make sure they meet the requirements. If your tenant's online rent to rent check shows up with an expiry date of when their right to rent expires, you will need to carry out a follow-up check, whether they are a tenant or an occupier. The follow-up check will need to be carried out either upon expiry of the visa or 12 months after you carried out the initial check, whichever is the later. This actually means that you could, in theory, legally move a tenant into the property today and their visa expire tomorrow. You are not breaking the law. However, as a landlord, you may want to consider the risks if their visa is not renewed throughout the duration of the tenancy. It may mean that your tenant may need to return to their country of origin during the duration of the tenancy, in turn not being able to fulfill the fixed term. All documentation should be seen in person and the original documentation provided to you. It is important that this is carried out face to face as per the requirements of the Immigration Act 2016. It is very important that landlords keep evidence and documentation that the right to rent checks were carried out upon the initial start of the tenancy, and also any subsequent follow-up checks that are conducted whilst the tenant remains in situ. It is very important to make sure discrimination does not come into play when verifying a tenant or occupier's right to rent, and you must ensure that you are treating every applicant in the same manner by asking them to provide the same evidence that they have the right to reside. Now, at the beginning of this video, I promised you a free gift. I want to invite you to my next landlord legislation webinar, where I go more in depth into important market updates and legislation changes. All you need to do is click the link in the description of this video and register your place for free.